These are the great wing shooting destinations of the world, steeped in tradition, offering the pinnacle of shotgun sport. Tour the planet with us.
Hi, I'm Chris Batha. Welcome to the Gardone Valtrampia, Italy, home of fine Italian gun making. Guns can cost anywhere from $750 to $75,000, and here at FAMARS today, I'm going to show you the differences. Oh, shot second barrel, yes!
The difference between harvesting a game bird for your table and fully experiencing the sport of wing shooting is difficult to explain. The result is the same, a dead bird. But how you arrive there, your emotional involvement, and ultimately the memories you take away are far different. Part of truly experiencing wing shooting sport is the story and the history of the shotgun that you choose to shoot. Maybe the best analogy is cars. A Chevy pickup will get you from point A to point B. A fine Italian sports car will do the same thing. But the trip will likely be one that you'll always remember. That's why through the ages, wing shooters who can afford it order custom-built best guns.
What makes the best gun? What makes the best gun is the life in the gun, the handling, what they refer to as the MOI, the moment of inertia. The gun's life comes from the people who work on it. In total, we're clocking up somewhere around 1,000 hours of human endeavour in this gun. Every one of those little minutes gives this gun a unique feel, quality and life. So you end up with the best gun that has a performance, not only is it aesthetically pleasing, it's absolutely functional and it can be taken out and enjoyed. I call it functional art, the fact that you can admire it, but you can still use it and shoot it, put it back in the gun cabinet and admire it again. That's what makes the best gun best, the people who make it. The machine I'm standing in front of it is a CMC machine, computer machine cutting. Basically, it cuts to great tolerances, removing unwanted metal and forming the actions for the FAMARS shotguns. The removal of the metal, this excess unwanted metal, would have been done by hand and machine, milling machine in the past. This machining allows him to spend much more time on the detailed craftsmanship and hand finishing, which makes FAMARS one of the finest guns in the world. The old gun is cut from one solid block of steel, and the excess pieces, if you take the fore-end iron that we were just looking at, is used to cut smaller parts out, and eventually, after it's cut, we end up with a trigger. So nothing's wasted.
Yes, we moved in this location in 1990. We decided to move here because we wanted to buy the machines and to give a completely different set to the company. So before we had the outside supplier who was producing the parts from us, and as we are picky, we didn't like what the other people were doing, so we do it our way. And we start buying the first machine, and then the second one came, and the third.
This is the complete FAMARS action. You'll see the enlarged fence. This is put on the sporting shotgun, and also on the double rifles. The larger bolster and fence allows for a little thicker action, which increases its strength. And on a competition gun that's taken many thousands of rounds through its life, or a double rifle with large amounts of energy being spent when the gun's fired, just adds that little bit of strength and therefore longevity to the gun's usefulness and life. I know that they only make about 100, 105 guns a year in a good year, and considering when you see the factory and the number of workers and the investment in machinery and technology to go with the traditional craftsmanship, it's a wonder that 100 guns is sufficient to keep the company going, but they're still here after 38 years and they're going strong and building all the time, so you know, it's great to be involved with a company of such energy. You know, fairly youthful in comparison to other gun companies like the Purdys and Hollands of this world, but quite honestly they're matching them every step of the way in quality and delivery times especially. what we have now is the assembled lock with all the parts, and you can see the machining marks in them, and we're going to see how they're polished up and regulated before being assembled into the gun, ready for the engraver.
The best part of my job is meeting the clients, and because then we start a relationship with them, because what we do for them is to, actually not for them, we do it together, we create the gun they want. So, and it's not making a gun and thinking about having a gun made, it's something very exciting for both sides. So most of the time the clients have become friends of the family, and so that's why we go to all the shows, everybody want to come, my mother, the babies, everybody, because we like this aspect of our business, just to meet people. And when I see someone, I just think the gun he got, the engraving, maybe if it was a very long time before, I see him and say, ah, yes, that's the one, he has that very nice engraving, or I remember the stock, or something strange. And it really is the best part of it, not just to meet people and make them happy for what we can do.
The thing about fine guns is that the attention to detail from when you think of walnut from Turkey and steel from Germany, and you've got tubes coming from Belgium, and it's all put together lock, stock and barrel by workmen and craftsmen of superlative skills, and they put together basically a masterpiece.
One split second of inattention can turn art into scrap. As the process moves from metalwork to stocking, it's already becoming clear what Chris Batha means when he says these artists breathe life into each custom-built gun.
We're looking at a King's Ransom in wood. All of this is Circassian walnut. Some of the wood is 300 years old. Seasoned for over 3 years, air dried in great pole barns on the Mersin Turkish coast. Comes from the northern regions of Turkey, Kurdistan, on the borders of Iraq. Very, very rare, very expensive. It becomes more and more difficult to find, and exhibition grade pieces like this would command a price of $2,000–3,000, and pairs are a premium of maybe $10,000 to $12,000. This truly is a magnificent piece of wood. But let's go upstairs and have a look at the stockers and what they can do with it. From the state-of-the-art workshops downstairs, we now come into the traditional area. This is where the craftsmanship and the old-world gun-making skills that FAMARs demonstrate in every gun sets them apart from other gun makers in the world. The first and most important task is the wood-to-metal fit. If this isn't absolutely precise and correct, any irregularities will cause the stock to break in use. And this is a real old gun-making skill. The orange powder that you can see is to allow him to see any bearing surfaces, the little black marks, or where it's touching, and he will erase that. The attention to detail and the skill, the craftsman's skill, just has to be first class. Very old techniques that are lost, really. I should imagine gun making is one of the last of the really traditional skills. The work begins with a draw knife, where all the excess wood is removed. This takes great skill. You're looking at one mistake, and that blank that's worth $2,000 or $3,000 could be ruined. Most of the work is used with a draw knife, where excess wood is removed before more accurate finishing to the direct measurements are taken. And you'll see that they'll measure the gun several times during this process, so as they get closer and closer to the finishing, they'll use finer and finer tools until we get to the point where they're using fine sandpapers and sanding blocks to tickle the gun in. As we're getting closer to the finished stock, it needs repeatedly to be measured and compared against the client's requirements, and that is how we obtain the custom fit that FAMARs is so famous for. The finishing of the stock is essential. It waterproofs the wood and protects it from wear and tear. The grain has to be closed, and it's done by heat and water and repeated sanding of the stock. They use several papers. They'll start with a coarse paper and work their way down to where they're using a rotten stone and a very, very fine paper indeed, probably a 400 or an 800. What we're going to look at now, and we're pretty lucky to be privileged to see this, the secret oils and ingredients to get that wonderful custom finish are guarded, but Paulo is going to allow me to show you today, so come and look at this. This is special. Paulo, ciao. The finished stock, when the grain's closed and it's been sanded, receives repeated coats of oil, sometimes 3 and 4 a day, and as it absorbs oil, reducing to 1 or 2 a day, finally to 1 a day. And over a period of 3 or 4 weeks and many coats of oil, you build up that incredibly water resistant but beautiful finish that brings out the grain in the wooden forend, which makes a custom gun. The Gardon and Valtrompia in particular is here because of the Romans. The mountains that we see contained iron ore, and they needed it to make swords, spears, arrowheads, and so on and so forth. So what happened is they naturally brought their forges here. They couldn't transport the ore, and the furnaces and forges where they created their weapons was here. And as time progressed, the industry grew up around this, and it was a natural progression into making cannon, and then handheld cannons, and then into small firearms. And eventually now it's the home of the Italian fine gun trade. Within a 10-mile area of this valley is the all of the Italian gun trade. There is one exception, but within 10 miles you can get anything you want done. The Italian proof house is here, the people who black barrels, the people who provide the tubes, the barrels, the metal, they're all here in this one area.
FAMARS was founded in 1967 by my father, Mario Biatico, and Mr. Remo Salvinelli. They both intend to create the best guns at the moment, and they have always had in mind the English guns, the lines, and the lightness, and the shape, and the engraving at that time was not as popular as it is now, so they did a big job in working with the best engravers and just let them do the best that they could. And that's how most of the best engravers we have at the moment, they were trained in FAMARS, and they work for many, many years exclusively with us. So, and now they became very famous, of course, because they are artists.
With the incredible artistry that goes into each FAMARS custom-built shotgun, it can be easy to forget that the gun's functionality is at least as important as its beauty. Building and regulating the barrels truly slaps the process back to one of ensuring performance. If the gun won't shoot straight, all the pretty in the world isn't going to make up for it.
The barrels of a shotgun are essential to its performance. They might seem like a simple pair of tubes welded together or brazed together, but the fact of the matter is that if they aren't true and that they don't shoot to point of impact, no matter how beautiful the gun, it isn't going to function well. And so we're going to look at the barrels of a shotgun. We start off with a solid billet of steel. Using the machinery behind us, it is bored out to the nominal gauge of the gun we're going to build. When the tubes are being machined, they are joined together at the chambers or breech, which is the most important part. In an over and under, this is referred to as a demi-block. In a side-by-side, a chopper lump, and not to be confused with the monoblock barrels, which are a very good system, but the finest custom guns all come with demi-block or chopper lump barrels. At this point, the barrels require the ribs to be fitted, side ribs to stop water ingress, and a top rib as a sighting plane. This is a very controlled process and very skillful, and it requires heat to be dispersed through the barrels consistently so we don't get any warpage. This is one of the oldest barrel making skills of them all. Each tube is checked by eye, and he's making final alterations in actually shaping the tube so that all the lines when you look down here are completely concentric. This process is still carried out by the human eye, and it is far more accurate than any machine. And once again, this is what makes a custom gun so truly unique. The only way you can get a straight shooting gun is to have a barrel maker who can make the barrels straight. The next process is laying the ribs. These are silver soldered on, as all best guns are, and it's quite an intricate task. The barrels will be packed with a shellac, and the ribs will be laid in, and there will be twists of wire at 4 or 5 inch intervals which will hold it all together, as they will distort otherwise during the heat process. The shellac acts as a flux and allows the silver solder to run, and the polishing that we're seeing now is to allow for a good bond between the silver solder and the barrels and ribs. What he's using basically are clamps to square up the ribs. He used the jig to align the barrels and correct their point of impact, and now he's using clamps to secure the rib and the side ribs in the correct place before he starts to solder. You're paying for time-served craftsmen to spend as much as maybe 100 hours on one set of barrels from beginning to end, and the final thing is a gun that functions properly and shoots to point of aim. It's quite amazing that with all this machinery and technology, the human eye is still superior. The trained human eye, I might add. Now what you're seeing applied now is basically a resin, like a ground shellac, and that's the flux that will allow the solder, the silver solder, to run and get that really clean, tight finish of ribs to barrels. What you're going to see now is a honing machine. The barrel requires that it has three processes given to it for the internal diameters and bores. One, the chamber; two, the forcing cone; three, the nominal boring, which produces a choke at the end of the barrel. This was traditionally done by hand, but could be very inaccurate. And here at FMAR's, an investment of nearly $1.5 million, there is three machines that carry out this process. Here we have a set of FMAR's barrels for a sporting shotgun, hence the ventilated middle ribs. It needs to be chambered. It's a 12 gauge, needs to be chambered to 2 3/4 inch chambers. And traditionally this was done by hand. Once again, it's a critical part of the performance of a gun. So we have a machine here, which along with the full barrel making machines cost over $1.5 million. And we're going to ask Paolo Pelli, the barrel machine operator, to show us how he cuts the chambers. And here we have lock, stock and barrel. And we have one of the finest guns made in the world today. I hope you've enjoyed watching how it is made and how we have created such a masterpiece.
From the time a custom-built gun is ordered until it's delivered to the anxious owner's hands can easily be a year or more. You can't rush this kind of art. While the final steps in finishing a gun are excruciatingly detailed and time-consuming, they are undoubtedly what make each gun a true, one-of-a-kind masterpiece.
The delight in attending or visiting the FMAR's factory, one is the family themselves, the generosity, warmth, and everybody I've ever came with or visited with or I've joined here at the factory has been treated like a member of the family. When you go upstairs, the staff or the workers are exactly the same. You'd never know the way that they talk to each other and talk to members of the family. There's no hierarchy like you get in a normal factory. It's a big family, and that's reflected through the quality of the workmanship. Most of the workers have been here for several years, minimum of 10 and some of them 30 plus. You don't get loyalty like that if you're not sort of handling them well and treating them right. And that reflects in the workmanship. They know the guns that are made, right from the Excalibur, right the way through to the Sovereign at the high end, or the Rombos and Castatories and the big double rifles. And so that knowledge of the product that they're making is reflected in every gun. The attention to detail, the quality of workmanship is just extraordinary. And what we've got now is the finished gun. It needs to be shot and tested to make sure it's regulation of all the firing pins, strikers, the triggers, the safety, and obviously the ejector system is working faultlessly before it's given to the client. What they're looking for is that the gun obviously fires and that it fires in the correct sequence, but that's the proof of a best gun and perfect craftsmanship when this happens. Both cartridges come out at exactly the same time and travel exactly the same distance. And you won't find that in many machine-made guns. One of the great highlights I like is the fact that when you come, because of their long established relationship, Mario Abbiatico, he wrote many engraving books and brought many of the engravers, the Italian engravers to the sort of forefront of gun making, and made them what they are today. The Pedisolis and the Galeazzis wouldn't be here now as household names in engraving if it wasn't for him. And when you come down to the gun itself, if you can come and you can watch an engraver working, I couldn't even draw a pigeon, and to see somebody just carving in metal and laying gold into metal and creating flowers and scrolls and vine leaves, and just I mean, it's unbelievable. It's just a skill that you have to admire and find fascinating. I could sit and watch it for hours. It's just, you know, you don't know what's coming next. And it's quite amazing, the laying out and the way they do it. They're so casual, you know, they literally pick up one of their fine chisels and a small mallet and they just go to work, and next thing you know, they've created a pointer on point, or a Labrador retrieving, or a flush of bob-white quail. It's just incredible, you know, just something that's truly fascinating. The great thing about ordering a custom gun is exactly what it says on the tin, custom. The stock's cut to your dimensions. You can order barrel lengths. If you want 26¼ inches or 31½ inches, the barrels are made exactly how you want them. You can specify the barrel weight, the overall gun weight, whether you want single or double triggers, Prince of Wales grip, straight grip, competition grip, your fore-end woods, the finish to the gun, what type of engraving. A lot of people like no engraving, what we call a funeral model, and other people like very ornate engraving, often including their dogs, even portraits of their family, and or their interests. And so, you know, the gun is totally what it says. It's custom made, bespoke, it's made for the individual.